Let's now briefly consider some other examples of price discrimination. One of them is quantity discounts. So here's an example that I found by just Googling the phrase 1 for $3 or 2 for $5. And this is what came up. So I found this extract from a blog written by a couple of English students who were traveling around California and stopped at a place called Pinky's Cupcakes. And that was the price, 1 for $3 or 2 for $5. And you can see from the photograph that these students left that looks like they each chose 2 cupcakes. Incidentally, there is an additional quantity discount. If you make 8 visits to the store, you get a free cupcake. Well, I have to add that nobody should be eating things like this, but if, for example, if for some reason you get some utility from cupcakes like this, then let's think about the nature of the choices that were made here. So I just made up some numbers, but if this is the price, if these are the choices that you're given, and these dollar amounts reflect your willingness to pay, let's suppose as well for this example that the marginal cost of producing a cupcake is $1. So we could then ask what consumer surplus would one of these students get if she buys just 1 cupcake. So if the cost is $3 and her willingness to pay is $4, obviously she would get $1 worth of consumer surplus if she bought 1 of the cupcakes. But we could ask, okay, what if she buys 2 for $5? How much consumer surplus would she get if she bought that second cupcake? So her total willingness to pay is $4 plus $2.75, and the total amount she'd have to pay in that case would be $5. So consumer surplus would be the difference, $1.75 in this case. So it would make sense to purchase the second cupcake, because what the consumer is trying to do is to choose a combination that's going to lead to the maximum consumer surplus. And obviously it wouldn't make any sense in this case to purchase an extra one. Presumably that would cost another $3, and that wouldn't make any sense. So what the seller has done, say instead of charging just a single price of $3 for a cupcake and selling just 1 cupcake, the seller has offered a choice. And so in this case, it pays the seller to sell the additional cupcake for, in this case, an additional $2, because that's going to be still in excess of the seller's marginal cost. So this is a way, in other words, of adding to profits. Well, these kinds of quantity discounts are really quite common. We go to Uptown St. John to the Canada Games Aquatic Centre. In effect, what we've got is a kind of quantity discount here. For an adult, if you just make 1 visit, you pay $9. If you want a monthly pass, you pay $100. So here you're obviously going many times, and if you go enough times during that month, then you're going to be paying less per visit than if you just paid the $9 for every visit that you went. So in other words, this is discriminating among people who would just like to go occasionally and those people who would like to go regularly, and at least commit to going regularly for a period of up to a month. Now there are other options. 6 months is cheaper than 6 one-month memberships, and you can commit yourself to go frequently for a year, and you can see that that is going to be less than twice 6 months. So this set of choices is a way of allowing people to kind of sort themselves out from the group that would just like to go occasionally to people who would be heavy users. And in this case, you can imagine that the cost of having another person going to the Canada Games Aquatic Centre is essentially zero from the point of view of the centre. The marginal cost, in other words, is more or less zero. So what you'd like to do is to essentially, in this case, kind of maximize your revenues. And so you want to sort people out according to their willingness to pay. Now, the other kind of price discrimination that I mentioned earlier is discrimination by observable characteristics. So in this case, let's look at the prices at the Aquatic Centre. Observable characteristics, obviously, are the age of individuals, and in the case of students with some identification, you can get some sense of whether they're working or not, and therefore what their ability and willingness to pay might be. So you can see that prices vary quite significantly. Adults, who would be people, in other words, age 16 to 59, are going to be paying the highest price, and then lower prices are offered to seniors and to younger people or students. There's also a family admission, which also is obviously offering a kind of discount. So why does it pay to set these different prices for different types of people? Well, obviously the idea is that these different people have systematically different willingness to pay for the product. So if you imagine that you're dividing your customers, in this case, just to consider a simple example, suppose we've got two kinds of customers. Those with a relatively high demand or high willingness to pay, and those with a predictably lower willingness to pay. Well, effectively what we're doing is considering that we've got two separate markets, and what we're going to do is to set a profit maximizing price in each of those markets. So you can see that if we just, in effect, apply our monopoly model to each of these markets, it's going to tell us that we're going to charge a high price, in this case $9, let's say, for adults, and maybe $6 for youth or students. It's important, of course, to note that these markets can be kept separate by the seller. So nobody, in other words, can go and buy a ticket for $6 and then offer it to somebody who would otherwise be charged a higher price. Other kinds of examples in which you see systematically different prices are different prices being charged for essentially the same product in different countries. So suppose that this market was, let's say, a low-income country, and we were, say, selling a textbook in that low-income country. We might realize that the willingness to pay, the ability to pay in that country is lower, and so students there might get charged a lower price for a book than students in a higher income country. Well, that concludes essentially all I'm going to say about this kind of price discrimination. We can just point out that the value to the seller is that by creating this separate market, they're able to actually add more to their profits than they would be if they just added these two markets together and charged just a single price in each one.